Welcome to today's CIT Tech for Business podcast. Today we're moving a little bit away from our educational focus to sitting down with talking with our founder, Chris Taylor, and our current CEO, President Kyle Etter. And we have Andrew Juranek joining us from our strategic team because he was the mastermind behind this awesome idea to talk about the start of CIT. So these guys don't have a lot prepped. We're just going to throw answers at them, see how it runs. But everybody's favorite, we're going to start with a little bit of an icebreaker question. It's Monday morning over here, so see how awake everybody is. First off, are you more productive in the evening or the morning? I'll go first. I'm Kelsey from our marketing team because I didn't say that earlier. And I am definitely more productive in the evening, which is why I drink copious amounts of coffee in the morning so I can pretend that it's in the evening. What about you, Andrew?
I'd probably say like just after lunch.
Interesting,
So,
right in
like,
between.
Yep, like right in between. Like, get some food in me, I'm ready to go.
Way to shoot down the middle. You're probably a
Yeah.
rare bird for that one.
We'll take a poll later. Who else is like, yeah, you probably are part of the very minute minority there.
Yeah.
What about you, Kyle?
Morning, definitely the morning. I'd say it's flipped as I got older. I would say when I was younger, I would have said evening, but I think I'll say past 40, it went to morning. Morning for me right now, for sure.
Things to look forward to as I age. Good to know. Good to know.
Andrew, on your side, I'm ready for a nap about that time. So yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Chris?
Yeah, I am definitely a morning person. I've been a morning person all my life. These days I'm up at 5 o'clock and raring to go. And once I get a few cups of coffee, and I'm even more raring to go. But then by after lunch, when I come off that coffee buzz, I'm ready for a nap by 2 o'clock. So definitely a morning person. Been that way all my life. Can't sleep in. Wish I could, but definitely more productive in the before noon hours.
So if you look for Chris or I, we're napping about 2 o'clock.
It's that siesta lifestyle.
Get a hold of us in the morning, otherwise we're going to be taking a nap later.
Yep, or else we're napping.
So when we're working remotely and we see the away status,
Yeah,
we know what's going on about 2 p.m.
yeah,
Cool.
about 2. Yeah,
Cool.
That's what's going on.
Awesome. Well, Andrew, do you want to start us off with the first question of the morning?
Yeah, sure. So I've always heard it since I started at CIT a little over 6 years ago that it started with two guys on a fishing dock, and it went from there. What were some of the next steps? How did you come up? How did you know what to do next?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's accurate. But I think it even goes back farther than the sitting on the dock morning. So I think the whole inception of where it came out of started back when I was in college, and I originally went to UW Stout to get into the hotel restaurant management business, and then I quickly realized that I didn't want to do that, and I wanted to get into all things business and technology. And in order to do that, I needed a PC back then because the computer lab at that time was super busy. Everyone was in there typing everything in the computer lab. So I convinced my parents that I needed a computer at school or else I wasn't going to make it through. So we ended up going to a system builder in the cities called PC Express. PC Express was one of the early white box compatible system builder producers in the Twin Cities, making compatible PCs back when what I call the PC explosion, happened in the mid and late 80s. So I picked up a PC, went back to school. While we bought that PC Express, I ended up meeting the owner of the organization, and at that time, I needed an internship as a part of my degree, so he offered me a part-time job selling PCs on the weekends. That turned into a full-time job, which turned into a sales management job, where I met our current president and CEO, Kyle Etter. He was also at PC Express. So if you look back prior to the inception of CIT, really a large group of our core leaders came out of that system builder business when the PC really started to take off and explode in the mid to late 80s. So we all came out of that. And then from there, I think the vision on the dock was myself and Mark, who also worked at PC Express. We hired him from a restaurant. He was our waiter, and he did a really good personal job. We ended up hiring him as a sales rep. He became part of the network team with Kyle. But the really the inception of CIT was, everyone's buying these PCs. Connectivity is going to be that really big next phase of these devices, right? We're going to need to connect them. They're going to need to connect to the rest of the infrastructure. At that time, this was pre-internet, right? So it was really just about connecting them. The desktop had a typewriter and had a terminal on it in most cases. They typed all their letters and did their spreadsheets on the typewriter. They did their heavy lifting. Their core application that ran their business was on a mini or mainframe back then. And now the vision I saw was we were going to replace the terminal and the typewriter with a PC, give them basic file and print sharing, give them that really early client computing world. And that's what that real inception on the dock was, to say, hey, we need to focus on connectivity, right? And the interesting piece, like I said earlier, is the internet really wasn't a business tool back then. It existed in the background, primarily in the university systems and so forth. And in the billboard, is that what they were called, Tom? What were they called?
BBS,
Billboards back then?
Yeah.
Some of that gets a little foggy, but yeah, so it on the dock really focused on the next phase of connecting all these PCs everyone was buying.
Yeah, there was, CompuServe and AOL was in its exception, so a lot of dial-up, but Novell networking was what we were really emphasizing around, and that's what I was working with Mark at PC Express. We had an early start on that. The version was like 2.15, so to give you an idea how early that was in the networking side. It was a 2.0, level platform. It was only a few years into its inception. Novell was the dominant leader at that time. They were pretty much the go-to for that side of it. And when I joined the team side with it, to say, okay, let's take this Novell networking, let's network these PCs for these customers, let's connect it to their AS400 and their deck backs and those types of things, and give them the green screen that Chris was talking about. And it was coaxial cable at the time. There was a thing called ThickNet for some things. There was backbone, just this horrendous copper connectivity. And then you had this weird product called ArcNet, which was pretty much, if you got a copper line, you could connect it in any way possible, so we were slinging cable around over lights and stuff. I mean, it was kind of a wild west of connectivity back then. It was a little bit all over the place, but it was a lot of fun, and it was just exploding. There was a ton of things happening throughout that whole time period side of it. And and I remember Chris was putting together PCs for customers as they kept coming in. I remember the initial thought was, we're just going to do services. We don't want to do hardware. Services where it's at. And then the customers, saying, no, we need to buy from you. So Chris was assembling computers, and we were bringing in servers and stuff signed to be Novell servers, and we were placing them out there, so it kind of, the customer base really kind of drove, a lot of the things we did. We were small, we were listening, and, so it was pretty easy to add a service or do something like, sure, we'll do it. So it didn't take a long time to bring on new stuff. But Chris was accounting, Chris was assembly, Chris was sales, and Chris and Mark both started primary focus on sales. There was another technician that was there before I joined side of it, that was original partner, then left a little bit later after that side of it. But it was him and I originally being the technical side of it. Mark was, I think, even your first tech, right, Chris? I mean, Mark.
Yeah, Mark really took the technical side of that, just because he was, you guys had worked on that Novell networking world at PC Express before we started. So he really took and was helping more technical, helping those organizations deploy those early servers and connecting the PCs.
I had a funny story on that one, because I remember, because I was still at PC Express at the time when they had just first started. Mark gave me a call. He's like, hey, can I stop by your house later? I got a question for you. And he was like trying to figure out how to do these things. So I was showing Mark how to do these technical things, because even when we were PC Express, he did a lot more of the sales front, and it was me and some other guys that were more on the technical side of it. So he didn't spend a lot of time on the technical side. He had a certification, but it was funny because he'd be coming over to my house and asking me this question stuff on it. So that was kind of the inroad that we were gonna connect again, as we were going through that side with it. But I still remember coming over and I'm showing how to connect things up.
Yeah, funny piece of the history, Kyle. You talked about that. Our clients kind of continuing to drag us into that system builder and selling hardware, and fast forward 30 years later, and still half of our revenue from CIT is still hardware, still fulfilling those strategic products for our clients. So it's really interesting how our core group came out of that system builder business, selling PCs, building PCs. And we still do that 30 years later, which is really interesting because we completely shifted our focus into the services side of the industry and helping organizations deploy, connect, support all this new connectivity and infrastructure. So it's interesting that's still in our bloodline is selling hardware and selling that strategic piece of the equipment. So.
Yeah, it's kind of that solution sale. I mean, really just, it was that early, the customers wanted a solution, not just one service or the product. They wanted the whole thing. And that solution sale became evident early on, I think. And that's held true today. Yeah, that's a very good point.
Did you say that Chris did assembly?
Yep.
So you built the computers, you did the white boxes?
Yep. We were a system builder back in our early days, and like Kyle said, our clients kind of dragged us into that. That really wasn't going to be our focus, is system builder business. But our clients said, "Hey, we need the PCs, we need the servers. You guys know how to do it. That's your background. We'd rather just get the whole solution set from you guys." So I was building PCs back in my early days, doing sales, doing accounting, building PCs. I was acquiring all the componentry. We would buy bare bone platform boxes. We were an Intel partner, so we were early on assembling the desktops and assembling those servers from the ground up that then Kyle's team was putting Novell NetWare on back then and starting that really, really early days of client server compute. So
yeah, you got to remember this, we go back that far, this was megabit hard drives, so 40 and 80 megabit hard drives in these. They had they were moving from DOS into Windows for Work Groups, 3.11, which actually had some network awareness to it. We were putting in network cards into them and dealing with, a 640K memory limit that was underneath Windows. I mean, it would only recognize 640K for running applications. So it was a different time. I mean, it was definitely. Things have come a long, long ways in 30 years, but these were not complex machines, but they were, for the time, it was a pretty giant leap forward. They weren't inexpensive either. I mean, the average computer, I mean, they were upwards of $5,000 for a desktop. Some of those, I mean, they got up there. So customers were pretty selective where they placed them initially because they just didn't give it to everybody. It was there was a pretty big expense to it, but in comparison to like a green screen terminal and the cost from IBM and those things, it was relatively inexpensive overall if you kind of looked at the state of the technology at that time.
Was there a lot of overlap? How did you go from PC Express to CIT? Was there like a leap of faith moment that you're like, okay, like we got to go, both feet into this new thing, and and then how did you, if it was Chris that said, hey, Kyle, come on with me, like kind of like how did that conversation go? Like how did you get the guys from PC Express? And obviously you're a good salesman, and that's half of it. How did that go?
And we still stayed in contact with the whole team over at PC Express while they were still in that big system builder business, and Kyle was running the network department over there. Unfortunately, PC Express was sold, and then in 1995, CIT closed their doors. So
PC Express closed their doors.
Yeah, I mean PC Express closed their doors. So that allowed CIT to really contact a lot of those individuals that were now looking for jobs, right? So we brought a large team of those PC Expressers over to CIT and continued to build. even though that system builder market got really competitive, really big, national, and kind of drove the margin out of that industry and became a commodity product. So PC Express, along with a lot of other system builders, struggled to stay competitive in that market, and it cleaned up a bunch of that market as it grew. Today, if we look at it, it's really Dell and HP and Lenovo, and a lot of that traditional system builder business has gone away.
Yeah, and that was the rise of, there was a group in town called Northgate. There was a group in town called Zeo. So this area had a ton of national PC builders. It was really a hotbed of early PC compatible stuff, which was pretty interesting that this market evolved that way. And then you had Gateway up in Dakotas, so this Midwest had some big players back in the day, and they were ginormous for a while. And then that was, Dell was birthed in that time period out of that side of it, and then Compaq and Hewlett Packard were around, which eventually Hewlett Packard acquired Compaq and kind of moved on. But that was late in the 90s when that finally happened. But it was it was a different time. I moved over in 94 because PC Express was sold prior to going out of business from the original core group to another firm, acquired it to kind of diversify their portfolio, but they really didn't understand the PC builder, and it was just not a normal business. I mean, it was very bizarre, and they tried to run it like a normal business, which hence I think did not put them in a good position. And when I left kind of a year before things really shored up side of it, because I had worked under Chris at a time, and I worked with Mark on those sides. I've had a great respect for both of them, and really obviously enjoyed the networking side of those things. So we stayed in touch, and then eventually just made the leap to come over and say, yeah, I think it's time to go over. I'd rather what you guys are doing is where it's going, and I'd rather participate side in that. And as Chris said, our other friends and cohorts that were still there eventually, we all just stayed in touch, and we all liked working together. It was a very fun, we had a lot of great people over there, a lot of great relationships we built. Wasn't always the best work environment from the ownership level, but from the coworker sides, it was great. I mean, we were all young, we were all having fun with that side of it. We were meeting great customers and having the market. It was very dynamic. Things were changing quickly, so it was a lot of good times back then, from as far as the relationships and technology where it was going. So we all enjoyed it, wanted to keep working together. So I think that kind of fostered, us, coming back together again to kind of get the band back together a little bit, where it was at. So made a lot of sense.
Okay. Yeah, kind of like a reunion tour.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, and we continued to stay in contact with that team that was at PC Express over the years, and continued, even as people left after PC Express closed, they went and got jobs elsewhere, but we kept in contact with that whole core team, and a lot of those individuals came back and ended up working for CIT over the last 30 years. So, and a lot of them are still here today. So it's been a really, really good core group. Timing, I think, was really good, because the industry, that introduction to the PC into business was a game changer in the whole technology evolution world, right? And it was a game changer, right? So we spent a lot of time integrating all those PCs into businesses and showing them feature and functionality, and then from there it continued to evolve, right? And then the internet came, and then Y2K came, and then e-commerce came, and then the whole client server compute world took over, and we started to replace the minis and mainframes, right? So we started to move that workload from the big rooms full of compute to client server world. So we put horsepower on the desktop, put servers in the back room, run a Novell or what transferred mainly into Windows Server at the time, and it just continued to evolve, and that kept driving CIT forward and kept driving our growth over the last 30 years.
Did you have to do a lot of customer education on, like why you should go with this? You said you had they had the typewriter and then the terminal, and you're like, here's this one thing. Did you have to do a lot of education on the sales side to be like, here's why you need this one thing and, go with us for it.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty straight. I mean, everyone was asking for it, right? It wasn't a lot of sales, right? People were going, hey, this old typewriter needs to go. This green screen, which I'm very limited what I can do. It's limited to my core system application that runs our business, but I can't word process. I can't do spreadsheets. I can't do basic fundamental graphic stuff on a typewriter or this green screen. So in comes the PC onto the desktop, and it is a complete business game changer for every industry out there. It wasn't really limited to any industry. Everyone was just clamoring, we need PCs, we need a server, we need to start looking at client server and compute, we need to start moving workload. I mean, it just continued to evolve. And then, like I said earlier, when the internet came along and people started to commerce over the internet, we stopped faxing, we stopped mailing, we started emailing. It was a complete game changer how we communicated as businesses and how we went forward. And that just continued to snowball and drive the business. And then after that, when the Y2K thing came along, a lot of the worry about the Y2K change was those old minis and mainframes and the code and the hardware running them. There was huge concerns about those having problems with the Y2K change. The PC and the client server compute world was new enough that most of that had already been designed and built to handle the Y2K change. So it was just kind of one thing after another to continue to grow CIT. And it, I'll be honest, the sales part of it was fairly easy, right? I mean, I'm not going to say I'm one of the best salesperson out there, but the sales was pretty easy. And Kyle remembers the days back at PC Express. I mean, people and businesses were just walking in the door looking for PCs. We were just order takers at some point. We weren't even selling anything. I remember my big day at PC Express. A pig farmer from southern Minnesota came in, and he spent $8,000. Keep in mind, this is in the late 80's. He spent $8,000 on a PC to run his pig farm.
I was gonna say, I mean, that was a big you got to remember in that time period, people were buying these computers for their home, and they were using Excel and WordPerfect were just coming into and there was a word processing called WordStar. So there was a few of these apps where people were using them at home, and they wanted to bring them into the business. So they started, the magic of a spreadsheet was just realized at that time. I mean, there was SuperCalc and Lotus 1, 2, 3 were kind of your big spreadsheets, players at the time. Microsoft was, kind of in the background, even at that level. They were just starting to make some inroads, but they were a fledgling company too. It was, as those came out, just like, it happens still a little bit today, that consumer, they wanted to do it at work, and that started to say, so someone would bring a PC into the office all of a sudden because they like the spreadsheets. And then they start to see it, and then they're like, oh, we got to network these. Oh, hey, we can connect to the mainframe. So these things started getting a groundswell, and that's, kind of how things started to really flip. And as it progressed on, Chris jumped the internet side. I remember, do you remember this, Chris, the early office when I fired up that first Windows NT side of it, or I put Windows for Work groups on the computers, and I said, look, we can email each other, and you go, why the hell do I need to email you? You're right next door. we had no internet or anything, but they had this cool email client on there, and they're like, yeah, check this out. We'd done messaging and stuff on dial-up for CompuServe, and a few things was kind of the business place. We had to go get updates and drivers and everything. But yeah, once that internet connectivity came in, that email really lit up, because now it wasn't just, me in the next office that Chris could email to. Now he's like, hey, I could email a customer, and these things started to, kind of evolve through there. And, once Microsoft got a foothold side of it, we were really skeptical at first, going, can Microsoft figure this out? Because Windows was pretty clunky back in the day, early on, and their first foray with Windows NT that kind of got rid of that 640K, and it could truly multitask and a few things. It was that the writing kind of came on the wall, as that started to evolve. And once their version 4 came out, I think that really was the beginning of the end. And then when they released Active Directory to compete with Novell's directory service side of it, that really started to foster, where Microsoft really rose to power, coming out of that side of it to become far more dominant.
And so kind of going to the name CIT, Computer Integration Technologies, how did you come up with it? And two, what were some of the other names? It's kind of like hearing like your parents talk about like, oh, we had these names for you, like you're Andrew, but you could have been, Michael, or what were some of the names that you guys were throwing around?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting point you bring up. The name was a struggle, right? It was a real struggle. Myself and Mark spent a lot of time brainstorming on names. We knew what we wanted to encompass in the name, but we struggled how to put that together. You're right. We knew we wanted the computer in there, right? We knew we wanted technology, but it was trying to figure out the integration connectivity component that was really a struggle for us, right? And then once we came up with computer integration technologies, we're like, this is way too long, it's too big, but it really encompasses everything we do. So it over time that kind of morphed itself into CIT, but really the fundamental core name was all around computers, technology, and the integration of that. And connectivity was one that we threw around a lot. We wanted to get connectivity in there. We ended up on integration instead. We knew we wanted computer in there. We knew we wanted the word technology. It just evolved into computer integration technologies, which today has evolved into CIT. And I would gander to guess a lot of people new to the organization don't know what CIT completely stands for. And the funny backstory on that is a lot of people would come to CIT and go, oh, Chris, what is your middle name? Because they thought it was my initials, which was a really funny sidebar topic, right? They're like, what's your middle name? I'm like, it has completely nothing to do with my name. It just evolved from, us brainstorming for, it seemed like months on, what is this name going to be? Because we knew we wanted key pieces of it in there without getting too big. At the end of the day, it did, but it's really migrated into a really, I think, a good long name and a good abbreviated name.
Yeah, that was going to be my question, like how long it took you to kind of settle on it.
I think it was weeks, if not months,
just throwing it around
in the early adoption, talking about names, and we struggled with just too many. The acronyms in our industry are all over, right? So we just struggled with we couldn't really use acronyms because a lot of people didn't know what they stood for back then, and we had to explain it. So I think we ended up with the computer integration technologies, and really feel that even today it describes who we are pretty well. So there you have it. There's the long and short of that name.
Yeah. I love that people came in and was like, what's your middle name? And you're just like, you think it.
People today still ask me what my middle name is, right? Because they really want to make it that it's my initials, but it's just not.
Yeah.
Do you remember
There's a silent I.
There's a comedian that poked fun at Chris at a company event because he heard CIT and then he knew it was Chris Taylor, and he accused him of thinking so highly of himself he named the company after himself.
Yeah.
So like that is basically what he.
Fun times.
No, this has been great. I love hearing the stories as somebody who loves history in general, but just someplace that I've grown to love and work at. It's great to hear the origin stories. It's like how Spider-Man gets bit, or Tony Stark starts making his suit. It's great to hear the origin stories and know what it's evolved into 30 years later.
Yeah, and we can, as you just heard for 30 minutes, me and Kyle could go on for hours about this. But I think it's really important, and we still talk about it today, those major milestones in the technology evolution of CIT, I think were really, really huge in our growth, in our what we are today, right? And it all kind of goes back to that PC system builder and then everything else. And we could have a whole nother session on, here comes the PC into business, here comes the internet into business, here comes Y2K, here comes e-commerce and the whole .NET explosion, here comes the evolution of client server computing, where we moved all that workload, and then here comes security right after it, that is really evolved into where we are today. So we could go on for hours, me and Kyle, on that, but I think it's really, really critical to understand those huge changes in technology evolution and how they shaped and formed and helped CIT grow. So we could have a whole nother topic on that, Andrew.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. It's I love talking with you guys just in general. But this has been really fun. Thank you.
I think it's neat. I mean, Chris mentioned earlier too, though, if you look from the start to where we're at today, we're still just putting the solution together again. I think that's, as Chris was talking about all those milestones, I mean, those things have changed. Technologies continue to evolve and go, but our core purpose on what we're doing for the customer has not. I mean, we just have continued to adapt the solution to the technology shifts and still approach the customer with the same idea that we're going to make this technology work for them, and we're going to continue to move them forward as technology does. And that has not changed. It's just the way we do it continue to changes, which is what I love just so much about this job, is that change and shift and continuously improving how that technology works through the technology evolutions is a lot of fun. It's very enjoyable and there's a lot of satisfaction with seeing making it really work.
Oh, this is awesome. And here I've been sitting here smiling and nodding. For anybody that just listens and doesn't watch the video, I'm like, I smile and nod because I'm about to give Andrew my job and be like, you do fabulous, you run the podcast. But no, as we alluded to, I, of course, chatted these guys on the side, and I was like, there's going to be at least one more episode because this is awesome. And boy, it is. We kind of went over, we've barely gotten through. We touched a little bit on Y2K, but pretty much we did late 80s, early 90s. And we're like, we have 30 years of business decisions, business history, building out departments, all of these different things that we could talk about. So if anybody has a specific question that they would like covered, feel free to email us at info@cit-net.com or head on out to our website, www.cit-net.com/podcast. And then we will meet you all back next week for another episode. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Chris. And thank you, Andrew, so much for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Great conversation. Look forward to more. Thank you.